Hello, welcome back to my channel. Recently, I've been thinking about the fact that there's a pandemic going on, and also that there are probably books written about pandemics, and decided that I should do a little bit of research into that because I think I'm finally in a place where my anxiety is calm enough that I could read books about pandemics and plagues and not feel the need to scream. So, this is me attempting to research that. Unfortunately, I did not find very many books about surviving quarantine and avoiding the plague. Like, most of these books involve pandemics and plagues, but they usually turn into apocalypse type scenarios or survivor type scenarios, which I am not opposed to. I love a good apocalypse and I love a good survivor story, but I really wanted the day-to-day minutia of living in a world where there's a pandemic, and I didn't find a whole lot of those. So if you are an author looking for new avenues to explore and things to potentially write about, the minutia of daily living with the pandemic is what I would like. I would like a book on that. Okay, if you write that book, please let me know. I would love to read it. Even if it's not published, I just send me. I would like to know. Anyway, okay, so let's start with the YA literature. So the first book is The Mask of the Red Death. It's a really weird title, by Bethany Griffin. I will be honest, I don't have high hopes for this book. The Goodreads description of this book is really vague. Basically, it says that there's a plague that has decimated populations and everybody is dying, and there's a group of people who are partying because it's the end of the world, and what else are you going to do? And then she encounters two boys at these parties, and they have secrets. And that's literally all the description says. So I'm assuming from that description that she is hiding from something, and that it's a love triangle between the two boys that she meets. I don't know. I don't know if I'm finally growing out of YA. This book just doesn't strike me as interesting, I guess. But I am interested in the subject, so I am definitely going to give it a try, and we'll see. I don't know, it's possible that the description is just very poorly written. And I don't want to judge a book by the description or the cover. I would like to read it and see how I feel it in terms of that. Because I do think the idea of people partying, even though the world is ending around them, is a really interesting idea. It is kind of the idea that they're hiding from something really secretive. And if the love triangle is done well, then I will probably still hate a love triangle. I have outgrown those. But I don't know, there might be a case where there's a love triangle that I am okay with, and I might just not have encountered it yet. We'll find out. We'll see. All right, book number 2 is called No Safety in Numbers by Dania Lawrence. Oh, I'm sorry. This book is about a strange device that's left in a mall, and it's left in the air ducts, I believe, and the government shuts the mall down and nobody in the mall can leave. And at first everybody's like, cool, we have access to all these clothes, all this food, and then people start to get sick and resources start to disappear, and this story follows 2 boys and 2 girls, and it's the first book in a trilogy, and I am hooked on this idea. Like, I believe that this will possibly go over trying to quarantine yourself, but also you're stuck in a mall, and it feels very Survivor-esque. I don't know. I really have high hopes for this book. It's definitely YA, so I'm sure that there will be some people falling in love, which is fine. Like, I'll deal with that. But I'm mostly there for the pandemic and plague side of it. Book number 3, Cinder by Marissa Meyer. So this is a retelling of Cinderella. I actually read this book in January, the beginning of this year, right as the COVID-19 was really hitting China really hard. So I remember hearing things about a plague happening in China and being like, ooh, wouldn't that be bad if that spread across the entire world? Scan to a year later. Here we are! Anyway, so this follows Cinder, who is a cyborg and a gifted mechanic. Because she's a cyborg, she is considered a second-class citizen. Running through New Beijing, which I believe is after World War III in this book, There is a plague that kills indiscriminately, and there is no known antidote. Cinder has to contend with uncaring stepmothers and the stepsister who's psycho. She has to deal with a sudden encounter with the Prince of the Realm, Prince Kai, and she also has to deal with a mysterious doctor who knows way more than what he is saying. I loved this series the first time around when I read it. I would highly recommend it. It's just a good, fun read. It's a very easy way to get into the realm of dealing with pandemics and plagues happening without that being the main focus of the story. So this is a good first step. I definitely want to reread these because now that I am more experienced in the language of pandemics and plagues, I feel like this story would be a little bit different. And maybe I would feel a lot more anxious about the fact that a plague is happening. Like, I think the stakes of the story will feel a lot higher to me just because of the experiences that have been going on in my world. Next up are books that are in the adult category, and I'm sure that they deal with adult themes. So just a heads up for any of my readers who are young or who are young at heart. The first book's, okay, this title, I cannot pronounce it. I don't know how to pronounce this word. Orcs and Crake by Margaret Atwood. I have not read anything by Margaret Atwood, and I have also not seen The Handmaid's Tale. So I'm way behind on that. So I would love to get into reading Margaret Atwood. I've heard so many good things about her. So this, and I actually own this book, so this would be a great way to jump into this. So this book follows a boy named Snowman, and it is in a world where genetic engineering has wiped out civilization. Snowman, who used to be known as Jimmy, is concerned that he might be the last human on Earth. And this sounds like a survivor story, and I'm totally here for that. I love the aspect of just surviving. I don't know why that is so interesting to me, but I really like watching people figure things out and do what they can to avoid being killed by nature. That is a secret passion and love of mine. So I have great hopes for this one, and because I own it, I can just get started on it whenever I want. Okay, the next book is The Stand by Stephen King. The New York Times reviewed this book and says, "This book has everything: adventure, romance, prophecy, allegory, satire, fantasy, realism, apocalypse. Great! Exclamation point." I have never read anything by Stephen King. He's considered the king of horror, and I, as a scaredy cat, don't read a whole lot of horror. I'm still working my way into that genre. So I approached this book hesitantly. This is his longest work. It is 1,500 pages. And in case you're wondering, that is 48 hours of audio. So even if somebody read this book to you, it would take them 2 days to read out loud to you. Actually, funny story. This book was just filmed as a TV show, and it wrapped up filming in Canada days before everything was shut down for COVID-19. So that's kind of a really funny twist of fate that a book about pandemics and the end of the world turned into a TV show and then was almost shut down by the end of the world. I don't know. I just thought that was really funny. Anyway, this book is about a testing center that is testing biological warfare, and one of the inmates escapes because, of course. Anyway, this test subject who escapes exposes the world to a super flu, which wipes out about 90% of the human population. That's the premise, basically, and then it's the story of people dividing themselves into groups and trying to figure out how to live and survive when there is no technology in the world, and just the ethics of human survival. This is when I got to this book, I started noticing the trend of, hey, plague, apocalypse, survival story. So maybe I should be a little more concerned about the fact that there's a pandemic and a plague going on in our world. Anyway, I am not going to vouch for this book. I just wanted to put that out there, that this is a book about pandemics. I'm sure that it will be terrifying and horrifying. And I kind of want to try it. I don't know if this will be the first Stephen King book that I read. We'll see. Okay, the next book is called The Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton. This is the same author who wrote Jurassic Park, FYI, and I love the story of Jurassic Park. So this follows a space probe that was sent to collect extraterrestrial material from space, and it gets knocked out of orbit and crashes into a town in Arizona. 12 miles from the crash site, the U.S. government starts to notice that there's an entire town of people who have died, and they're not sure what happened. They all looked as if they just dropped dead in their tracks, and I'm not sure what else goes on in this novel. I'm sure that it will tell us. I've never read any books by this author. I love the movie Jurassic Park, and I feel like I need to jump in and read the books. I've heard that his books start off really slow and focus on world building and then get much more intense and build at the end. So in that sense, it sounds a lot like Brandon Sanderson, where there's a lot of setup so that you can understand when the climax really happens and when it really hits you. So I am excited for this one. Next, we have A Journal of the Plague Years by Daniel Defoe. And I think Defoe is the way you pronounce his last name. I'm not sure. Anyway, Daniel Defoe wrote Moll Flanders and Robinson Crusoe, and he compiled a history of the bubonic plague when it returned to London from the years 1665 to 1666. And he lived through this period, this 18-month period, where 1/4 of the population of London was killed from the plague, which is like astronomical to me that so many people died. Also, 1666 was the year that the Great London Fire tore through London and burned a lot of the city. And I just realized that this 1666 is the year of the bubonic plague and the year that London burned, and it also has the number 666 in it. And I don't know if anybody else finds that interesting, but I'm feeling pretty good that this year is not 2006. I feel a little bit better about things. Anyway, Daniel Defoe survived this plague when he was 5 years old, and then went to his friends and relatives and family and said, "Hey, tell me about all the things that happened." And this I find really interesting because at this point there was no hope of immunizations and it was all quarantine, life or death. So I feel like out of all of the books, this one probably will be the most eye-opening and probably the most of what I'm looking for. I want to know how people have handled the plague or pandemic and how it changed societies and the way that people viewed their lives and how fragile they felt. While I do love apocalypse and dystopian literature, right now I kind of want a little bit more of the real deal because I'm dealing with the real deal. I mean, I looked through a lot of websites on books about pandemics, and most of the plots started to sound really similar. Like I said, there's a lot of apocalypse, a lot of Hunger Games-esque stories where resources become really scarce. And I'm not saying that's not happening. I mean, that's just all that was encountered, and having now lived in a world for 11 months. What is March? March to December. That's 9 months. Thank you. 9 months of a pandemic circling our planet. I've discovered that there's a little bit more to pandemics than a shortage of supplies. Like, there's also an economy that can tank, and family members, and shortages of doctors, and that's the nitty-gritty that I really want to be digging into. But I'm sure all of that will change. I'm sure in the next 1 to 3 years, the literature on pandemics and plagues and face masks is just going to explode and fill the literature shelves. And I am kind of excited to see that. I might not be in 3 years. I might be so tired of this subject. But I'm excited to see where this goes. I wonder if people 50 years from now are going to look back on this time period, the next 5 years, and be like, oh my gosh, instead of survival stories and dystopian, everything was about plagues. I wouldn't be surprised if plagues become the new dystopian and they fill that void of things that become really popular to read. Anyway, that's all I have for now. So I will talk to you in the comments and talk to you later. Bye!